The Elden Ring is truly an ambitious game that wants you, the player, to explore every little corner of it and find the tale it hides under its beautiful visuals. All you know from the offset is that you play as a tarnished of no renown, blessed by grace, and are compelled to make the journey to the lands between and become an Elden Lord. What that actually means and how one might go about doing that, and what's the deal with the giant glowing golden tree are all things you have to discover yourself. Like other FromSoftware games, the grand story is hard to fully digest on a first playthrough, especially because there's no in-game journal to refresh you on the events, characters, or unique terms you encounter across dozens of hours. There really should be, but it is a story I nonetheless enjoyed trying to piece it together for myself. Freedom is the word that every aspect of Elden Ring's design connects back to. From the moment you set foot in Limgrave, the first of many interconnected regions of the lands between, you are completely free to go wherever you want. And okay, sure, that's far from a new concept in open world games, but the way it's handled here is truly extraordinary. If you wanted to, you could be an explorer and spend hours upon hours in Limgrave, delving into every mini dungeon, fighting every boss, discovering every NPC, and leveling yourself up to better prepare for what's next. Alternatively, you could follow the light of grace guiding you towards the main path and the first major dungeon. Or you could find a hidden path to a new region that's meant for higher levels and completely bypass the first major dungeon entirely. Maybe even steal yourself a cool little weapon while you're there. Of course, games like Skyrim and Breath of the Wild have already explored this concept of freedom in their world. So what's the big deal this time? Well, a few things set Elden Ring apart from games like Skyrim that provide a similar openness. For one, Elden Ring doesn't scale enemies to match your own at all, so jumping into a later region means you're always dealing with stronger enemies, making the risk-reward prospect of doing so very real. But perhaps more notably, the way its different areas are connected makes finding these new ones more than a simple matter of choosing a direction and heading towards it. Limgrave is designed very specifically with a main path in mind that takes you through to Stormwell Castle, and finding a way around that truly feels like you discovered a hidden passage or an alternative route, which is a super cool feeling that is not present in most open worlds I've personally explored, simply because in Elden Ring it is a lot harder to stumble upon these little secrets. You also have a lot more freedom in how you approach combat than any previous FromSoftware games, thanks to a bunch of familiar new systems that are used in interesting ways here. Stealth is a more viable option thanks to the addition of crouch walking, which finally lets you sneak by tougher enemies to get behind them for a critical hit. There's also horseback combat in large open areas, which gives you more mobility and the ability to attack on both sides of your right-handed weapon, but has the drawback of taking away your ability to roll out of the way of big attacks. You can craft items on the fly using materials found in the world, so you can be pretty much ready for whatever a situation calls for. You can summon a large variety of creatures to fight for you, each with their own unique ability and situational advantage. And most sustainably, you can equip Ashes of War to your weapons and completely change their affinity and skill. The Ashes of War system essentially combines two elements of prior Souls games, weapon affinities and weapon skill, by making them items that you can freely equip to your armaments. For example, let's say I find a really good rapier and I really like the moveset, but I'm building my character with a focus on intelligence stat, which means it won't get the kind of damage bonuses it needs to be a viable weapon. If I find an Art of War that bestows a magic spell onto a weapon, I can equip it and transform it into a magic weapon, thereby giving it intelligence scaling on top of whatever skill the Ashes of War has. Best of all, if I eventually decide to alter into a different build, I can still keep the same weapon and just put a different Ash of War onto it. Of course, you also have to find a specific item to unlock the different affinities, but it's nonetheless an incredibly smart addition that allows for a ton of variety in your preferred weapons. The most important element of Elden Ring's philosophy, though, is the freedom to just walk away and do something else when you hit a wall. Elden Ring is hard, which is expected from a FromSoftware game, but its difficulty has surprised me even as a veteran of the Souls-like genre. I hit multiple points, even all the way up until the moment when I reached the very last boss, where I have unlocked paths to several bosses and simply could not make headway on any of them. But even though I hit a dead end on those paths, there was always somewhere else I could go, a region I hadn't thoroughly explored, an NPC quest that I had set aside for later, a light of grace indicator that I had not yet followed. There was never a point in Elden Ring when I was at a complete loss of what to do, and every time I explored those other regions and followed those alternative paths, I would find new gear and items, level up my stats, or learn new spells or skills that would eventually give me the extra edge I needed to power through a boss that had given me problems before. While yes, Elden Ring in many instances can be compared to Breath of the Wild, however the big difference is that in Breath of the Wild I could usually predict what's going to happen when I get to the orange glowy thing off in the distance. I'll do a puzzle underneath a shrine, do another puzzle, and probably get a cool temporary weapon and a spirit orb. That's not to take anything away from Breath of the Wild, it truly was awesome, but the pattern became somewhat routine well before the end. In Elden Ring, by contrast, very rarely did my predictions come true. I'd head to a lake and all of a sudden get ambushed by a dragon. Follow a river expecting to collect some minor crafting materials only to find a dungeon filled with enemies and traps. Enter a cave and get ambushed by little goblin men, or take a seemingly unimposed elevator and find that it just keeps going down further and further and further, until eventually I found myself not in a small dungeon, but one of its many jaw-dropping new regions. Best of all, each of these little excursions rewards your curiosity with something worthwhile. This could be a new weapon, a new ash of war, a valuable consumable, a new creature for you to summon, a new spell, or a new NPC to talk to. There are so many valuable rewards available that I never felt disappointed by my prize, regardless of the amount of effort it took. There is a generous fast travel system with a ton of points strewn all across the map, a marker system that lets you drop points on the map to denote things like NPCs, boss locations, out of reach treasure, materials, and more, and a speedy spectral horse named Torrent that allows you to quickly cover ground and easily mount and dismount as the situation requires. It's really important to add that usually I really don't like horse mechanics in gameplay, simply because it takes so much time to get on them and get off them. However, in this case, Elden Ring feel not only incredibly practical, really beautiful to look at, but just work overall to the player's advantage. As far as combat goes, Elden Ring is certainly closest to Dark Souls 3 when compared to other games in FromSoftware's library of action RPGs, characterized by weighty attacks, careful stamina management, and a bit of a slower pace than games like Bloodborne and Sekiro. The two big new additions are the ability to use a guard counter by blocking an enemy attack with your shield and immediately pressing the strong attack button to follow up with a crushing strike that can leave weaker enemies in a crumpled state, and a jump attack which gives melee weapon wielders a new type of heavy attack that can also be used to stun enemies and leave them open for a critical hit. They are both great additions that offer melee classes fun new tools, but for the most part FromSoftware has certainly adopted an if it ain't broke don't fix it approach. What really makes the combat in Elden Ring so good though is its enemy design and variety. Not only are a fair number of them are absolutely horrifying, okay, maybe not up to Bloodborne level horrifying, but you know, it does get there. But some of these baddies are absolutely vicious, coming at you with wild swings and combos that seemingly go on forever and can hit from 10 feet away. Others are more methodical and hide behind their shields to wait for the right opportunity to either parry you or catch you while you're winding up. Others can seem weak, but can be huge threats when they ambush you with a grab that kills you in one hit. Many are designed to punish those who just smash the dodge roll button without care, which makes Elden Ring a very hard game, but it's a good style of difficulty, one that's less about fast reaction speed and twitch reflexes, and more about learning, adapting, and finding the planted weaknesses in an enemy's attack pattern. Deciphering those patterns and acting upon each moment of opportunity is a large part of why these games are so much fun, when you finally beat your foe. And then there are the bosses. I don't want to spoil them, but there are a handful that are some of the most visually and mechanically impressive FromSoftware has ever created. Some of the later ones got really close to crossing the line in terms of what I deem fair and reasonable when it comes to a life restoring second phase after a already brutally tough first phase and 2 or 3 against 1 handicap battles. As mentioned before, any walls I hit were surmountable once I took the time to do something else and come back stronger. It is no exaggeration to say that Elden Ring is FromSoftware's largest and most ambitious game yet, and that ambition has more than paid off. Even after 87 hours of blood, sweat and tears that included some of the most challenging fights I've ever fought and innumerable surprises, there are still bosses that I left on the table, secrets that I've yet to uncover, side quests that I have missed out on, tons of weapons, spells, and skills that I've never really used. Overall, while the fundamentals of combat haven't changed much from what I've seen before, the enormous variety of viciously designed enemies but the brutal and surmountable bosses have brought its battles to a new level. Like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild before it, Elden Ring is one that we'll be looking back on as a game that really have moved a genre forward. There is no doubt in my mind why the Elden Ring has got Game of the Year, and in my opinion it truly is a masterpiece. Listen guys, thanks so much for watching. Like the video if you did and subscribe to the channel for more awesome videos in the future. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.